April 30th, 2014 was one of the happiest days of my life. I welcomed into the world Aurora, a beautiful, brown-eyed, dark-skinned little girl with tons of dark hair. She was perfect as she looked up with those brown eyes for the first time. My heart melted. She whimpered a tiny, hungry whimper, and from there my motherly instincts kicked in, and I cared and nurtured her. Little did I know that in a few months my world would be turned upside down. After leaving the hospital with our jaundice and deaf baby, we were excited to get on with the routine and the rest of the family. On the bright side of having a deaf child, I did not need to tell the kids to be quiet while she was napping. But it was difficult to calm her. I couldn't sing her a lullaby at bedtime. She would never hear me say how much I loved her, nor would she get to hear her siblings' giggles or her daddy's silly stories. Again, that was the least of our worries. Being deaf was something way more manageable than what our future was about to reveal. Aurora's first 4th of July was interesting. A deaf child doesn't get to hear the fireworks and startle like the rest of the kids. She didn't get to be amused by the loud booms and snaps. She liked the colors, but slept through most of it, with not a care in the world. She was wearing a festive red, white, and blue dress to be patriotic, but she was so very tiny wearing it. It was still a newborn, and she was so very petite. Little did we know that in the coming days would be some of the hardest. I'd been taking Aurora back and forth to our primary doctor to watch her weight. She was a couple months old and still only weighed 7 pounds 2 ounces, not gaining very much from her 6 pounds 14 ounces that she weighed at birth. I thought maybe she would be small and she would get bigger eventually. It wasn't until I took Aurora to a lactation consultant and we discovered Aurora had poor suck and she wasn't eating well at all. We were later admitted to Sanford Children's Hospital, or the Castle, in Sioux Falls, and she was diagnosed with failure to thrive, one of many that would follow. We were given instructions to go home with after they kept us there for 3 days with her gaining weight. We would then go back to her primary doctor for weight checks, and we would be admitted into the hospital again. This time, they made me pump and only feed her with a bottle, and we decided to give her a formula for premature babies. Again, we were discharged after gaining weight 3 days in a row. Again, we went home with a set of instructions to follow along with. A home health nurse came to do weekly weight checks. Everything seemed to be going better this time. She still had a real hard time eating, even though we fed her religiously every 3 hours like the doctor had stated, and did everything we were supposed to do, even though it was exhausting. But I was willing to do whatever it took to keep my baby happy. Here we are now again at the doctor, and after not seeing much weight gain, our amazing doctor decided to do some testing and admitted her again to the Sanford Children's Hospital, this time doing some more serious in-depth testing. We had a team of doctors and a plan. She had a swallow study done. She had blood tests done. She had an MRI scheduled and also had an NG feeding tube put in, which is a tube that goes from her nose to her tiny tummy. It was a very stressful 5 days watching them poke my baby, ask us questions, and watch nurses ram bottles into her mouth, making her gag and basically showing me how to do this. Apparently, they didn't think that I knew what I was doing and I was just starving my child. They showed me different techniques to get the job done and to continue even if she gags. After I exhausted all options in 30 minutes, I was told I needed to give her whatever was left of her NG tube. I still wanted to go back to nursing my baby. I felt like such a failure. I felt that it was all my fault that she couldn't nurse properly. And some of the staff made me feel that way as well. I tried hard to get my supply up, but eventually I had to switch all to formula. It was a choice I later regretted. It was a warm July day. I was sitting in the hospital alone with Aurora. I was waiting for the neurologist team to get there after not making it the day before so we could get the results and finally be discharged. I called my husband Skip to let him know the neurologist would finally be coming home, and he needed to get there. An hour later, the doctor showed up, followed by Skip. Perfect timing, I thought. The neurologist sat down like she was another visitor and asked us routine questions. She looked Aurora over and then gave us the grimmest news like it was no big deal. She informed us that our daughter had pontocerebellar hypoplasia. She explained what it was after telling us our daughter would never do anything, is all I heard. And then I remember hearing die in infancy. She explained what it was after telling us our daughter was going to die. Or not have a very long life. And if she does have a long life, there really wouldn't be much of it. She would be bound to wheelchairs and feeding tubes and trach tube to help her breathe and be in and out of the hospital, and eventually we were going to watch our child die. I was crippled with fear. I felt it creep up from the tips of my toes to the end of my hair. After the doctor left, Skip and I held each other and cried. We cried tears of fear and loss. We cried because we didn't want to lose our baby. We cried because we didn't know what we were going to have. We cried because we would never experience normal things as we knew it with her. After the shock was over, I looked at my husband with a strained calmness and told him that we would be okay, that God had this. I called my mom after I was done sobbing to tell her the not-so-great news. I called friends and other family members, and each time I told them, the reaction was the same. Silence, followed by, what does this mean? It never gets easier telling people what this meant. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told them that Aurora is going to die. We are going to watch our daughter die. I explained how eventually her body would shut down. She would never sit, walk, talk, or eat on her own. The more I explained, the more it sank in. But the more positive I was. I refused to believe that this was going to happen to my child. Maybe it was denial, or maybe it was God saying it was okay. I have this. Exhausted emotionally after making one last call, I sat in the cold, dim room and watched my baby sleep. I looked at her, and I saw such beauty and hope. I saw her beautiful long eyelashes that she batted at the doctors. I saw her long hair that the nurses always commented on. I watched her tiny chest move up and down and looked at the monitors and the recording her heart wave and respiration. I looked at my baby and I thought she was going places. She will not let this define her. She will beat this. She will overcome these hurdles and she will go places. Finally, after spending 5 days in the hospital, we were getting to go home. We walked down to the elevators as we said our goodbyes to the staff on our way down the hall. We hit the button and down we went. We turned in our badges at security and away we were. We got Aurora situated in her car seat and off we went to another appointment. For once we got good news. Aurora had beyond perfect vision. She could see okay, check that off the list of things that could go wrong. She could hear me, but can she see me? So I guess this wasn't too bad. We scheduled a follow-up, glowing with excitement as we finally gotten good news. They commented on how gorgeous Aurora is and loved how much hair she had. We happily got into the car where I had to feed Aurora, my first time in the NG tube out of the hospital. It was the end of the happy news and back to reality. The numb feeling crept up on me again and started to cripple me with fear of losing my baby girl. Fear that I would never fully overcome. Fear that some days would consume me and take over me and turn such sadness that I swore pierced my heart and made me die. A death strangled by emotion. It made me see black and white instead of rainbows. It made every smile that crept up on my frown turn to guilt. It made every waking moment of my life hell. consumed me for days at a time. The emotions would pour out of me like rain from those dark clouds that hover over and suddenly downpour with no warning. That was me every time I took a shower or I was alone. I would let loose a thunderstorm of my emotions. It would start with a sniffle and a trickle of tears, then rage like a violent lightning followed by thunder. Then my tears would just pour down my face and my head would go in my hands and I would sob uncontrollably. I would sob because my baby can't hear me. I would sob because I would never see her wedding day. I would sob because there would be no prom, no first date, no first kiss, no first sleepover, no first play date, no watching her learn to crawl, no watching her sit up for the first time. I would sob when I came into the realization that I might not even get to hold her the next day. I was a prisoner to my own emotion and I was trapped. And the only way out of this was controlled by me. I never let a single soul know the way that I was truly feeling. The only one that knew was God. It was the end of September, and we were preparing our baby girl for her first surgery. She was finally getting a more permanent feeding tube in her stomach, a G-tube. Finally, I wouldn't have to make trips to the ER to have them reinsert her nose tube. Finally, I wouldn't have to take my baby's face and constantly keep her arms or swaddle her to keep her hands from her face. It was a relief, and yet it was dreaded as well. I felt that fear creep up again. Fear I would lose her during the process, and she was so tiny. Fear she wouldn't wake up. Fear something horrible would happen in the process, and I would never see that sweet baby again. I tried hard to swallow it and not let it consume me this time. I won this time, and I was able to be there for my baby the way she needed me to be after this very long process. She was not a happy camper, and in so much pain that even morphine couldn't control. I tried to hold my baby, but it made her hurt worse. It was a horrible day and night, the longest so far, hearing her say the only thing she could. Ow. What was supposed to be a quick and somewhat painless process turned out to be way too much pain for my baby girl. After all the ups and downs, all the good news followed by bad, we experienced our first miracle. We learned that Aurora's left ear healed. I knew something was up because she had started to flinch to certain sounds, and just days before I noticed my parents' dog startled her a bit when they barked. I was filled with pure joy, and I was not going to let anything get me down. This was me starting to fight the way out of the hell of my emotions. I could feel it tugging at my feet as I started climbing out of the burning hole. I wasn't going to let it get me this time. I kicked it for good. I was on cloud 9. I was so happy I was crying, and for once I was crying beautiful tears of joy. One ear was better than no ear, and we were on our way uphill, fighting whatever it was Aurora was fighting. We visited with the doctor and ourselves about the cochlear implants, hearing aids, and sign language, but now we were confident that the other ear would come, and sure enough it did a month later. We were watching miracles happen that even doctors couldn't explain. She could hear after being born deaf. She could see after being told she could be blind. What hope she gave us. Not just us, but to others. We started getting messages from strangers on the internet, along with our friends and family, about how she was doing, so we created a page just for her. We named it Aurora's Journey. Something simple, yet that's what it was. Her journey. After so much good news lately, we didn't think it could get much better. But in December, we got even better news. A different diagnosis. We traveled about 5 hours to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to the Shrine Hospital to see the neurologist from the Mayo Clinic. My dad drove me on what started to be a gloomy day. I was tired from not sleeping well the night before. I tossed and turned in bed. Again, my emotions started to get the best of me. I woke up in a cold sweat from the nightmares I kept seeing. I would dream our happy baby dream of our happy baby, then see her tiny little casket, and I would just see black. And sense of fear. And then I would wake up after that. And I would see my own nightmare of thoughts. I would think of all the things doctors may say or do to her and prepare myself for the worst. As it wasn't bad enough dreaming and thinking that, then driving to it seemed even more terrifying. I just wanted the day to be over. I wanted the crippling fear to stay in that hole, but it slowly crept its way out. It grabbed my toes and up my foot, and I would fight to keep it in that hole, but the closer we got to the hospital, the further up my body it would get. I tried to think of how happy I was that she could hear, and decided to chat away with her as we approached the hospital. Snow started falling from the gray sky as we got her out of the pickup and headed towards the hospital doors. The building was huge and filled with all sorts of neat Masonic symbols, some hidden, some in plain view. I took it all in, hoping it would help ease my mind and think of anything else than what I was doing. As we get closer to the door, I watched the huge flakes fall to the ground, like they do in snow globes. Some getting caught on my eyelashes and melting on my cheeks. There was almost enough snow to make tracks from our vehicle to the doors, but it melted quicker than it could stick. Finally, we approached the doors on what seemed to be a never-ending sidewalk, even though it was only a few feet from where we had parked. I swung open the door, and in we went. I sat in the waiting room looking around at all the other children there. Some were in wheelchairs, others using crutches. Behind me there was a glass to see how they made legs and arms and anything for those who needed prosthetics to assist them. They had a collection of some of the first that were ever made. It was neat yet gut-wrenching to see some of them. Some were tiny enough to fit Aurora. After observing all the wonderful things they do for children, I finally made my way up to the receptionist, where we checked in from there. We were given stickers and told to have a seat, that it would be a moment. But it wouldn't be long. No sooner than we sat down did they call our name. I was nervous, but I put a smile on my face, and away my bubbly self went. Down the hall, and on the right, there was a station with a scale, and we weighed her, and she was getting so big, she was almost 10 pounds. She was then measured to see how long she was, and her head was measured as well. After then, it was back down the hall and turn left, and then right to our room. The one nurse left and another joined us to ask the typical questions, and then the doctor. The fear leapt out of that hole and crippled through my entire body. It made me almost nauseous. My head was pounding, the room was spinning, my palms were sweating, my heart was racing, my ears were ringing, and then the door swung open and in walked the doctor. I wanted to jump into the hole and disappear. He reaches his hand out to shake my cold, clammy hand and introduces himself to me. Then turns to my dad and then to Aurora. He checks her reflexes, made some notes, and then gave us amazing news. He told us Aurora doesn't have pontocerebellar hypoplasia. She has cerebellar hypoplasia. Man, oh man, I wanted to hug this guy. I wanted him to pinch me and tell me this was a dream. This was too good to be true. I felt a tear start to form in my eye, but I couldn't let it fall or there would be trouble. I knew how great God was, and He always was with me. But this is just yet another miracle from Him. He was blessing me more and more all the time. After the doctor told me the wonderful news and the words, "She will walk and talk," I heard nothing more. I had visions of my baby girl at about 2 or 3. Talking to me. I had visions of that same girl, 3 or 4, taking her first steps and being feeding tube free. I heard my beautiful girl tell me how much she loved me. I heard her fighting with her siblings. I heard her sassy voice telling me no. I heard and saw a wave of heavenly emotions that I never thought I would experience with her. I was, for once, calm. That fear was back in its hole for good, or so I thought. Shortly after this, a amazing news. Things started to get better and improve slowly. Aurora was able to eat without her feeding tube here and there, and we thought we were going to go down the process of this and getting rid of our feeding tube. We went again several months later to talk to the neurologist that gave us the good news. He had wanted to take another MRI. He wanted to look at her brain to make sure she wasn't regressing, because that was something we had feared. In the meantime, Aurora had gotten really sick and been in and out of the hospital for about 3 months with respiratory infections and fevers and not good things. We were told that she would have to have her tonsils out. But then, after we saw a pulmonary doctor, things started to get better again. She would start to not have so many problems breathing. She would be able to drink her bottle better. She would be able to experience things in a normal way. But just as we had gotten all this wonderful news and things were getting better and she was getting better, things started to get worse again. Not only was she sick and battling these things in and out of the hospital, she was getting pneumonia from aspirating. So we did another swallow study, and it showed that she couldn't take things that were thinner than honey or thinner than nectar. So we went on our way with all this. And then, about 2 months later, we had another MRI. This time, it wasn't great news. We were told that cerebellar hypoplasia was out of the equation, that she doesn't have cerebellar hypoplasia, but she has pontocerebellar hypoplasia, and that would be her diagnosis. So, here we are, after numerous tests, having a genetics test done, and it's showing that she's the only one in the world with the way that her genes mutated. After hearing the neurologist say that anatomically she has pontocerebellar hypoplasia, but she functions more like somebody with cerebellar hypoplasia, we know that her days will be good. And she'll do things, and she'll be somewhat normal. There will be days that are very bad and very scary. But each day is a new day, and at the end of that day, that's the end of the chapter. We never know if she'll have another chapter. We never know if at night when I put her to bed, if that'll be the last time we ever get to see our baby. We never know if she'll get to wake up the next morning. We never know if she'll get sick the next day and we'll have to watch her pass in a hospital bed. We don't know what her outcome is, but we know that every day she's writing her own story. Every day she is making history. Every day she's doing more and more to prove those doctors wrong. Because we were told she would never walk. We were told she would never amount to anything. And here she is, right in front of us, hearing when she was told she would never hear. Trying to crawl when we were told she would never do any of that. And I know one day I'll get to see my daughter walk. But I just hope that it's someday soon rather than late. And that she gets to do that. And that it won't be her last step. And I pray every night that every night is not the last breath that she takes when I say goodnight to her. Even though she's hooked up to monitors, every time her monitor goes off, I jump out of bed hoping that she's still alive and that she'll be fine. It's hard. It's hard to have to tell your kids that you can't do things because your sister is sick. It was hard to tell them that their sister's dying and for them to understand that. So, with all that said, this is Aurora's journey.